Welcome to RSA Conference 2024. We're here recording live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. This interview is sponsored by Open Systems. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me today for this interview is Mr. Tim Roddy, VP of Marketing at Open Systems. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm doing well. Good to see you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Good start to your RSA so far?
Good start so far. Early in the week still, but everything's going smoothly.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking out the expo floor later.
Yeah, pretty good traffic last night for the opening.
Yeah?
So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, so today we're talking about network transformation and how that's driving demand for SASE services and what you call zero trust edge, which is not a term that I'm familiar with. So maybe let's start there.
Sure. SASE is the most commonly used term, Secure Access Service Edge, coined by Gartner.
Right.
Forrester has to use a different name,
yeah,
right? So they come up with Zero Trust Edge. It's the same thing.
Oh, okay.
It's the same thing.
I did not know that.
It's just a Zero Trust Edge.
That's the Forrester version.
It's a Forrester version of it, yeah. We were just recently named a leader in their first ever wave for Zero Trust Edge services as a service provider, so SASE services.
Gotcha.
That literally happened last week. So.
And, I think it would be good for folks who are not familiar with the different components of Zero Trust Edge or SASE. Let's maybe just do a quick refresher on the different components.
That's well, you shouldn't assume that. I agree.
Right.
So it's basically
not everybody does exactly the same thing.
Right, and it's an emerging of networking and security.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, decisions, equipment that are bought, deployed, and managed by completely different groups and larger organizations. Mm-hmm. They all report into the CIO eventually, obviously,
right,
from the budgetary standpoint, but they're oftentimes working completely separately. What SASE is all about, or Zero Trust Edge is about, is with so much data now in the cloud, in a lot of different places, no longer in the data center where you can control access.
Right.
Can't get into the room. You can't get access to the data. Well, what if the rooms are all over the place in the cloud and elsewhere, or at remote sites? And then you have users who are heavily mobile.
Right.
We're mobile this week, right?
Yep.
You're logging in from your hotel, or you work from home all the time. People that are hybrid, they're in the office maybe one day or 2 days a week,
right,
and then they're home or at the coffee shop. Otherwise, you've got to be able to get to that data. So you have to secure it, and you have to provide access. So it makes sense that now security and networking need to come together. So it's made up of two components, software-defined wide area networking, SD-WAN, which has been displacing MPLS from telcos for a number of years. Still got a ways to go. It's about maybe 2/3, 60% to 2/3 displaced.
Oh, okay.
But it's still a long way to go, and a lot of organizations have never gotten completely off MPLS. Sometimes you want it for backup, high-quality backup, and you got to connect certain branch offices to your factory floor or something like that.
Right.
You're going to do that. The other half of it is the security side, which is Security Service Edge, which is a catch-all term that refers to a secure web gateway, a cloud access security broker, data leakage protection capabilities, and zero trust network access for applications, eliminating the need for traditional VPNs.
Right. Or publishing it to the internet, right?
Or publishing it to the internet.
Yeah, so
and then you are doing that, and you look at all this data starting to break up different places. There's a lot of effort to move to a different security architecture and network architecture called Zero Trust, which was invented by Forrester analyst John Kindervag some number of years ago. He's not there anymore. He's a friend of mine. And I remember when he first started talking about it, but now you're seeing organizations do that. You don't do it overnight. It's not a product you buy. It is a philosophy and an approach, and you've got to work your way into it. And then you use these kind of solutions, SASE solutions included, as well as other solutions like IAM and things like that, in order to decide who gets to access what and when.
Yeah.
With zero.
Yeah, a term that's been somewhat abused in the industry to use as a metaphor, which sometimes confuses the use of it. But yeah, ultimately, is that what's driving most of this network transformation? We've had executive orders from the White House referred to zero trust.
Right.
CISA
and all those have been pushing it. There's all kinds of guidance in the government. It's mandated in the government, and of course industries, they pay attention to it. They don't have to do it. You see people that are in the defense industry or the critical infrastructure that are taking a hard look at it to shrink the attack surface. So that's definitely driving network transformation. But all those trends that I was talking about, where data's moved everywhere, is really the ultimate driver. That's why there's the focus in the executive orders on zero trust. That's why
so
people
compartmentalizing that data. That's
so shrinking right now. If you get into the data center for a corporate headquarters that's got 1,000 employees, once you're in the network, you move around almost anywhere.
Flat network.
Very flat network. But on the other hand, if you actually put what's known as a policy enforcement point right in front of that data, that server, and say, here's the people that can get to it. We'd like you to have two-factor authentication, so we're going to use IAM. Okay,
right.
So you're going to need that solution too. You need a bunch of different pieces. That's a total re-architecture from the way that you typically have operated. So.
And do you see companies, how much are they struggling with that, with taking their whole network, ripping it apart, replacing it? Like what is the general process you see? Are they tackling it small pieces at a time? Or
they're figuring that out. There's still a lot of people who are like, you'd think sometimes if we have a seminar on what is zero trust, no one's going to want to come because everybody knows.
Right.
Everyone does not all know. Yeah. And they got to keep their business running. At the end of the day, the C-suite's got to keep the factory floor running, got to keep people working, they have to be able to access, knowledge workers have to be able to access. Blow the whole thing up because you're doing a forklift change of a network. You can't do that.
Yeah.
So they want to understand it, and I think we've come a long way there. They want to understand, I think everyone does now, it's not a product you buy.
Right.
Okay? You're going to use some of your current products. You will not use some of the current products as well, and you'll go to some other things. But you got to fundamentally change it, and you have to have a very programmatic approach to how you're going to break things up and slowly get to it. It's a years process, not an overnight process.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of those product changes that you mentioned that are necessary there. Why would I'm sure you can go with Cisco and Arista and some of that stuff, but also you can use a managed SASE provider.
Right.
Why would somebody choose one over the other?
So when you're doing network transformation, you're talking about moving really three different plays, three different issues as a business. I have all MPLS, and it's time for me to get off of it because it's expensive and it's not meeting my needs to transform to more of a zero trust architecture. So then you're moving to a SASE solution. And then as an organization, you have to ask yourself, am I going to do it myself and manage it? Mm-hmm. Or do I want a third party to manage it?
Right.
And then once you have a third party to manage it, do I want to pick a vendor like the ones you mentioned and then go hire a third party MSSP, have them run it, kind of the traditional way of doing it?
Yeah.
Or do I want the vendor who manufactures and makes that SSE, SASE, SD-WAN solution, have them manage it for me? Mm-hmm. And why would you want to do that? You want to do that because they know that solution better than anybody. If you're getting a third party managed provider, they do the classic tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 answering the phone. First one answers the phone, validates that you're a customer.
Yeah.
Now, what's your name? What's your company's ID with us or whatever? Yeah, you're under support. What's the issue? Tell me about it. And then they ask a lot of questions. They've got a script to go through and triage, what the issue is. Like when you get to the hospital, you got to be triaged quickly. And then from there, you need to, the managed service provider's got to decide, can they help you? And they may tell you to turn something on and off, cycle it back on. Well, that's not really helping you very much. We wouldn't really want to know what's going on with this connection. It's slow or what have you. So then it has to get passed on to somebody else. You may, as a customer, have to have another conversation with that person, even though you told the last one all this. And finally, you just need to get escalated to a level 3 expert, and that's at the company of the product that you're using. We need to facilitate a 3-way phone call. That all takes time. That goes from half a day to multiple days to get resolved. If you're getting the vendor to provide it and the person answering the phone is a tier 3 engineer at the get-go, you speed the entire system up. You get your mean time to resolution dramatically shortened up. And that's what we do, and those that provide it as a service with their own people, that what differentiates them from those providers. So when you look at what an organization is going to do, they got to make that decision. Do I want to do it myself or not? If they are mid-market companies, they don't have access to enough cybersecurity personnel.
Right.
It's hard to find them, let alone hire them.
Right.
And keep them.
I was going to say, that sounds like it's also initiating a change in the personnel. The kind of staff that you're going to have.
Because MTLS, Telco took care of it all. They were like the tier 3 SD-WAN. It's their solution, their people.
Yeah.
Right? So what you're saying is, do I like that model? Do I want to continue it, but I want to do it with SD-WAN equipment and use the public internet to do a lot of this connectivity, maybe have a private backbone where it's needed.
Yeah.
That's the difference. But if you still like that high level of service and relationship with your vendor, then you can still do that with an SD-WAN solution as part of your SASE journey. Then you still have to have the conversation about, okay, now how are we going to secure it?
Right.
Just having appliances in your data center doesn't make sense anymore if you've now got more intelligence out at the branch offices with the SD-WAN connectivity.
Yeah.
So.
And branch offices have always been a challenge, right? You know,
Right.
because in a lot of cases you couldn't afford to put the same sophistication of security controls there.
Right.
You know, but now if you abstract the network layer and the security services on top of that, all of a sudden you can have consistent quality and level of security services across everything.
Right. And if you're an organization that say you got 3,000 employees, you got a couple manufacturing sites and corporate headquarters, you may decide, or you're going to have your bigger SD-WAN boxes in the bigger locations, and you may decide to put the security enforcement right there because the people are right there. Put it as close to them as possible.
Yeah.
Right? But you get small branch offices or the ultimate branch office of one, which is the home worker.
Right, yeah.
I don't even want to send them a box if I can get away with it, right?
Right.
I just want them to automatically, with maybe a little piece of software on their
ZTNA.
laptop, either ZTNA or if it's not ZTNA because it's general internet, sent out to the cloud for the SWIG running in a cloud somewhere across the globe closest to them so that you enforce your policies. They get a fast experience because they're used to getting it from the local internet provider, and everybody's happy. They're productive.
Yeah.
So
recently we saw a lot of, we're starting to see some validation of Zero Trust architecture. We're starting to see some wins. The one that particularly stands out for me was when Okta's support site got hacked. And the attackers used that to get into, I think it was Cloudflare, 1Password, and BeyondTrust.
Right.
And all three of those companies wrote up their experiences. And in each of those experiences, it sounded like Zero Trust was basically the savior there because they got, they were able to use OAuth keys that were stored in Okta's support site files, those HAR files that people upload for troubleshooting. But I think that was the first time we explicitly saw Zero Trust save somebody's bacon. You know, because they were willing to publicly share their experiences because the attackers weren't able to get past just that initial, maybe it was a sales employee or, whatever identity they got access to. They weren't able to get deeper into systems because of that. With your customers, have you seen some, what kind of wins are you seeing with folks who are maybe a little bit further down that journey?
Well, heavily everyone's moving to two-factor authentication. That's just a good best practice. It kind of annoys end users sometimes because they're constantly grabbing their phone, right? I remember the days when everybody had a separate token that you had to have in your pocket.
The RSA tokens?
Yeah, you don't need that anymore, right?
They still exist.
They still exist, and then they never die, right? They just keep churning the number. They need to push a button sometimes. But that's common. Everyone's using it for email and what have you, and at least once a day or more often you have to do it. It's being used heavily for personal stuff like your banks and stuff like that. It's for your own good, right? Yeah. And so that helps raise the trust level. And you're doing it in order to get into each app, so you're really restricting access on an application basis instead of just saying, I validated the VPN, I'm in for the day, or until it drops for whatever reason. So we're seeing that being done heavily. Then ZTNA, it's kind of unfortunate that ZTNA also uses the term Zero Trust because Zero Trust architecture and ZTNA to get to private apps are different things, right? So you can put Cloud Swig in, go to that kind of environment, still use VPNs, for example, and not have gone to a ZTNA to get those apps that you're running in a public cloud or in your own data center.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, we've seen, folks wanting to move away from VPNs. A lot of vulnerabilities and issues with VPNs over the last year. So.
And a lot of calls and complaints to the help desk. That's which IT doesn't want those, right?
Yeah, I imagine that's helping the transition.
Well, it is. I mean, that's the cost. There's the equipment. You have to do the upgrades. You got to monitor it. Well, that goes away if you've got a service provider taking care of all that for you. You still have to put the software on the endpoint and keep that updated. So there's no free lunch, but it's freer.
Freer.
And And you do it a lot more inexpensively because you don't have that CapEx expenses.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about SASE is
not slinging
it's
hardware
all
all
OpEx.
over the place.
It's OpEx. Even though hardware may be included for SD-WANs or maybe you want an appliance in a certain location with the SWIG capabilities, it's still part of your lease, right?
Yeah.
You don't pay for your Comcast internet box at home. It's just part of your fee. So
yeah, a lot more flexible
than
it was in the old days.
And if it fails, it's not your fault or your issue. It's the providers. So
awesome. Excellent stuff. Tim, thank you so much for joining me on Security Weekly today.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. You can visit securityweekly.com/open systems RSAC to learn more about open systems. And stick with us. We'll be right back with another interview shortly.